Welcome to the Arkansas Cattle Business Podcast, brought to you by the Arkansas Cattlemen's Association. Here, we dive into the heart of Arkansas's cattle industry, where legislation, education, advocacy, and development come together to support the hardworking cattle producers of the natural state. Whether you're in the pasture or on the road, this is your connection to the people, policies, and programs shaping the future of our industry.
Hey y'all, and welcome to this week's Arkansas Cattle Business Podcast. I'm your host, Norley Townsend. This week looks a little bit different. There's no Michelle this week, but we do have a special guest with us. Michelle is actually in Dallas, Texas while we're talking about this. So she's at an executive meeting, so glad she's down there getting new ideas for us and everything. But I'm going to introduce our special guest, Kirsten Midkiff.
Yeah, so my name is Kirsten Midkiff. I'm the Animal Health and Wellbeing Specialist with the University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture.
Yeah, glad to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
And this is your first podcast.
It is.
So,
yes, very first one.
Yeah, for sure. Very exciting. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background, and just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Louisiana. I grew up on a cow-calf operation with my family. I have one younger brother. I'm still helping out with some of those decisions back at home, so I'm very thrilled to still be able to do that while I'm in this position up here. I did my associate's degree at Clarendon College, so I took a little, I hate to say non-traditional route, but it was kind of in some senses, because I grew up doing livestock judging. It was a very big part of my life growing up, very involved in 4-H and FFA. So I finished Clarendon, transferred over to Mississippi State, got my bachelor's there, and then I decided I wanted to continue on with a master's degree. Finished that up in, I believe that was 2021, making me seem a little old. But I finished that master's degree in 2021 with a focus on beef cattle health and performance. Did some stocker cattle work there with Dr. Brandy Karish, and then finished up and went into my PhD at the U of A up in Fayetteville. So my particular focus there was beef cattle health, physiology, and nutrition. So a little bit of everything from stocker calves to some development heifers. And then I got this particular job started up in August. So August 2024 was when I first started this position. Not too long ago. Going to be coming up on a year here in a few months. So kind of odd for me to say, been here for a year, but really excited to be here in this role. With this in particular, mine's kind of unique because I love the beef cattle side because I grew up doing it, but I also get to deal with several other different species. So anything from small ruminants, I'm dealing a little bit on the poultry side of things as well with some of the diseases that happen in there, talking with folks about. But I also get to mess with veterinarians, get to talk with them about the different technologies and whatnot that's out there. And I also have a 4-H appointment. So the vet science program that we have here in the state is something that I handle. So excited to get all of that back up and going in the coming years.
Yeah, for sure. The vet science program is special. So
very, very much so.
Yeah. So with you being the animal health person, I'm going to ask you a few questions about general spring and summer livestock health. Mm-hmm. So what are the biggest health challenges livestock face with transitioning from spring to a hot Arkansas summer?
Yeah, there can be quite a lot. And it can range from some of those external, internal parasites to some that's caused by various different pathogens that are occurring inside of the animal, some that they come into contact with in their environment or whatever system that they're in. Some of the biggest ones that I tend to think about, especially in these summer months and then going into or spring months and then going into the summer, are going to be like our flies and our ticks. With those in particular on the fly side, we've got the horn flies, the face flies that can cause a lot of irritation on those cattle, but can also end up transmitting some diseases, causing some different diseases as well, like pink eye, for instance, would be one that we typically see a good bit of here in the spring and maybe moving into the summer. This is also that time whenever we see a lot of ticks popping up, so whether that's the Lone Star tick, whether that's that Asian longhorn tick that we've been hearing a whole lot about here recently. We see a big rise in those guys coming up into the spring, over in those summer months in some cases, and then starting to drop off into the fall. So several different things to hone in on whenever it comes to those external parasites. Internal, when we start to talk about the spring rise. So we think about deworming our herd, taking care of those internal parasites they can come into contact with. And then just other than that, one of the big ones that comes up in my head with the temperatures popping up and down quite a bit would be some of those different respiratory illnesses that those cattle can come into contact with. Even on the other side of it, all this rain that we're getting, we're very thankful for that, but can lead into some issues with some foot rot problems. So several different things that we can talk about whenever it comes to diseases.
For sure. So how can producers best manage heat stress in cattle, especially during the sudden temperature spikes we're about to see?
Yeah, that the heat stress can become a very big problem in our cattle. Typically see that right in the midst of those summer months, whenever we start getting really, really hot. And then especially as we think about kind of the southern part of Arkansas, we'll see a ton of humidity that can get tacked onto that. The northern part of Arkansas definitely sees that as well. But with that additional heat and then the humidity that tacks on along with it can cause a really big problem in our calves. So with that, I think the biggest things that we need to kind of think about is when those cattle have an opportunity to get under some kind of shade, whether that's making sure that they have access to those trees that's out in the middle of or out on the pasture so they can get out of that direct sun, and then making sure that they've got some good water in front of them. I mean, water is going to be the most limiting nutrient whenever we think about our cattle. They are needing it in that super hot, temperate environment. So water, and making sure that it's good quality water, is going to be extremely important.
So we kind of already talked about it a little bit, but are there certain parasites or diseases that producers should be on high alert in the late spring or in the summer?
Yeah. So we talked about kind of the flies and things of that nature, and then the ticks. Those will be some of the ones for sure that kind of plague our cattle. Biggest things there is going to be making sure that you're using some type of fly control, right? So whether that's one that's pretty popular, we see a lot of folks that are using those insecticide impregnated ear tags, making sure that you're getting those in their ear at the right time, because they do last for several weeks. So that's a plus side with those. I know a lot of producers that they utilize those. We see some dust bags being used for those as well. Maybe some insecticide sprays too with those guys. The plus side about those tags is that we can also see some effects on the ticks as well, especially those that attach in the ear. Some things on the tick side though that we need to think about is they're not just attaching in the ear, right? It's going to be along the neck. We see it on their underline, right in behind their forearms. We can see it around their udder and their tail too. So if you're thinking about ways to kind of help out with some of those external parasites, if you're wanting to use some type of wormer or an insecticide, making sure that it's one that's targeting those animals that you're wanting to get a hold of and control, right? Some of the other things that we can talk about as well on that, and I'll mention it too because it's something we've been getting a lot of questions about. Some folks have ended up using, there's a tick vaccine that's out, as well as there's an option to use, it's a tick and a hornfly vaccine that's out on market. So that is another option that our producers can utilize, not just on the insecticide side, but a one that they can actually get that injection into those livestock to help out with that. And it's really going to be targeting those pests. It's not necessarily doing anything on the disease side of things, but it's reducing the feeding time whenever we're thinking about a hornfly. So reducing the amount of time that they're on that animal and sucking blood. Whenever we're thinking about our ticks, reducing that attachment time and then getting those guys to fall off quite a bit quicker.
Yeah, so where can producers find those injections, or where can they get them out?
So right now, if a producer is wanting to use those, and I'll say it here a bit later on as well, if anybody has me coming out, I talk about it quite a bit too. The veterinarians are going to be their biggest tool on that. At this time, those vaccines, if they're wanting to use those, they have to go through the veterinarian, and eventually they're going to have to go through the state veterinarian's office, so they'll have to get that big check mark from Dr. Niles before those can be utilized. So getting in touch with the veterinarian if they're wanting to potentially use those on their operation. Of course, seeing if the vet thinks that that's something that would be deemed necessary if they would like to use those.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So a little bit, you kind of touched on this already, but what preventative care steps like vaccines or deworming should be prioritized in spring to prepare livestock for summer?
Yeah. So, you hit Two of the big ones right there. Yeah, vaccinations and deworming are going to be key. A lot of the times what we're seeing in our producers now is that they're going to be having those calves in the spring and weaning out in the fall. So then they have to think about on the cow side, what is it that they're going to be needing going into these summer months, thinking about those calves as well. What's going to need to happen during summer to get it prepared for in the fall. So making sure that we set our cows up, for cattle in general, up for success moving into these summer months. So getting those vaccines out of the way, whether we're, depending on what type of vaccines that we're going to be using, working with a vet for those in particular, figuring out that deworming schedule. One of the big things that we're seeing on the dewormer side and in some of those worms that can affect those animals and even those external parasites is resistance to those dewormers. So they're not working on some of those bugs, and it's causing a lot of problems, and it's causing a lot of costs associated with those guys as well. So making sure that you're using something that actually works in your herd on those bugs, and then getting that program scheduled out for over the summer. I think some of the other things is going to be really watching your herd and paying attention to them. And I know all of our producers are going to do that. That's something that is really key that I for sure love to talk to folks about it, just to see what all that they end up noticing in their herd, and they notice those slight differences, and I love hearing about it. So paying attention to your herd and seeing those little off steps. If you've got one of those rainy type situations, realizing that there could be a potential for some issues leading up to that, with some foot rot, maybe some other problems with that. Paying attention if they're coughing, if you're seeing any respiratory type issues, if you've got some labored breathing, making sure you've got plenty of shade for those animals out in the pasture. And I think one of the big ones, other than water, like we talked about earlier, is making sure you get that forage established ahead of time. All right, that forage is going to be their main source for what their food is going to be coming from. So making sure that that forage is out there and it's available for them, and it's growing and it's giving them the nutrients that they need, and not being afraid to give them a little bit of TLC if maybe they need it.
So, are there any signs that an animal may be experiencing early signs of heat exhaustion or other temperature-related stress? Kind of changing this topic there. So
yeah, I mean, that kind of goes along with it. I mean, if you've got one of those super hot days, one of the things that you'll typically see is those cattle may be going and standing out in the middle of the pond, right? They're going to try to kind of reduce or lower their body temperature a bit because they are getting so hot. But some of those additional signs for heat stress that we really need to be looking out for, if they're panting, I mean, that's going to be one of the big ones. Their tongue will be hanging out and they'll be panting. If we've got some of those increased respiratory rates or labored breathing, if they're breathing kind of hard on us, if they're salivating. One of the things that I like to look out for, and I mean, I guess this is just a me thing, some of those cattle that have those kind of longer hair on them, a little further on into those summer months, we can see those guys having a lot more issues than some of those that slick off kind of earlier on into the season. So I like to pay attention to those guys just a little bit more, just because I know that they're more likely to have some of those additional heat stress type of problems with them. But for me, I think the big things, if they're standing out in the middle of the pond, all right, they're reducing their body temperature. But you've got some salivation, you got some respiratory deals that's going on with them, and then you could see some of that additional panting associated with those gals.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more about the ticks moving on here.
Yeah.
So last year, the Asian longhorn tick was a big issue. So, and with Thaleria or Tileria, however you say it. However you say it. Can you talk a little bit about that and what that is and how to prevent it?
Yeah. So Asian, a little bit of history on Asian longhorn tick. So it's East Asian tick historically. The earliest that we've saw it here in the U.S. was in 2010. So I like to say that's not too long ago. It's been 15 years ago, so it's been a minute. But in terms of on livestock, the earliest that we had saw that was in 2017 on an infested sheep. So just a couple years ago was when we saw that. We started seeing it kind of like on the East Coast, so like West Virginia type areas, but we've seen that pretty well explode over these last few years. Went really far south, down into South Georgia, has went up past New York and in some of those other states, and then moving quite a bit west. The farthest west that we've seen it so far has been over in Oklahoma. And we've seen several cases here in Arkansas as well associated with that tick, whether it's they've tested positive for Theileria or they've had those ticks that's been found either on cattle or in the environment. Several counties so far that we've seen that in on the tick side. We kind of see that a little in some of those northern counties. So I kind of like to think about it is that Arkansas has kind of got this little dividing line in some cases. I mean, right across the middle of the state, Little Rock's kind of like that halfway point. We see kind of in those northern counties like Washington and in Benton, Carroll, Independence, and Searcy County, we're seeing those where that tick is pretty well being established, and we're seeing a lot of numbers for that tick. In terms of Theileria, we're seeing it a little bit different. The furthest south case that we've had for that has been in Arkansas County, and that was just in this last year. A little unique in that case is that his herd, there was about 52 or so head of A-aberrate heifers, ended up having some issues with anaplasm at that point, but he also had one that had tested positive for Theileria. And with that particular disease, we're assuming at this point that it's something that they pretty much, it stays with them for their whole life. So that can be extremely problematic. You know, we're looking to see how it's affecting them long term, but what we've seen so far is that whenever they contract Theileria is that they've got similar symptoms to anaplasm. Right, so it's affecting their blood, but we see that anemia. We see those cattle going down on us quite a bit. We'll see some issues with their milk production even. And in some cases, we may walk out and find a dead cow. Right, it takes over them quite a bit. So that's something that's been extremely problematic for a lot of our producers up in this northern part of the state. It's riddled through herds. One of the unique things about Theileria is that it can affect both cows and calves. So on that end of it, it's not discriminatory, right? It's something that can affect any of those animals. It doesn't matter what age that they are. And then trying to see how that's affecting them throughout. I mean, we can see reproductive issues. We can see animals that they abort. We can see stillborns with this disease as well, just like we can anaplasm. But there's not a treatment that's there. So that's kind of the biggest distinguishing factor between anaplasm and Theileria is that we can't treat it with antibiotics. There's not a treatment that's out there for it. So a lot of things moving forward and trying to figure out with both the Asian longhorn tick, how far that it's going to get, where that tick has been established at, is something that a lot of folks at the U of A, and I'm doing my best to help out with it as well, are really trying to tackle to be able to see how far widespread that it is. And then also on the Theileria side, so many questions with that I've been getting. How, if those cattle can actually overcome it, how long is it going to be affecting them? If there's any issues on the calf side, how that's affecting them long term, if it's affecting their performance after they're weaned. So many different questions that are coming up with that.
Yeah, so how can producers know if they have it? Do they have to get tested? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so some of the things that I tell folks, I mean, if you've got a cow, you notice that she's starting to kind of lose some body condition, she's got a lot of ticks that's on her as well. If you're seeing, some of those additional signs like what I talked about earlier, get in touch with a vet, have them come out, and then get that test done. So what we'll do is that we'll pull some blood on those animals, we'll get that blood sent off, and then we'll test to see whether or not they've got Theileria or not. That's really the distinguishing factor is going to be that blood test for figuring out whether they got that or not. And a vet will be able to do that. I mean, that, like I said before, that's going to be our big key and a big old wealth of resource, or wealth of knowledge that comes in with our veterinarians. So getting that done for them if they've got any potentials. If they want to maybe have some ticks pulled off of their cattle, or if they believe that they have the Asian longhorn tick, for that we're looking for a small brown tick, completely brown. It does not have any white, any gray on it whatsoever. The distinguishing factor for it is going to be those mouth parts. They're really small, kind of short and stubby, but they're in this kind of pentagon type of a shape with that. And it's a little bit smaller than some of those other ticks that's out there. You can get in touch with the veterinarian to get some ticks pulled, and they can get that sent off up to the U of A. Or you can get in touch with the extension office. We can get some tick collection kits out there, and we can come out and pull those sticks for you. And then Dr. Kelly Lofton and his team has been working really hard to be able to track that tick and where it goes. So several different options for trying to figure out whether or not you've got that tick that's there. And then on the Talleria side, get in touch with the vet for it.
So that's all my questions about the longhorn tick, but I'm sure if people have questions for you, we'll kind of get into that at the end of the podcast. So.
And I'm sure that I forgot to say a whole lot about it, but
you're good. That was really informative.
Yeah.
So a little bit, we kind of talked about it last week on the podcast about the New World screwworm. So what signs should livestock owners look for that might indicate them being there? They're not supposed to be here yet, but we know they're coming eventually. So.
Yeah. For this one, I've been given quite a bit of talks about, and I know it's something that a lot of people, producers, anybody has been pretty well concerned with if they've been watching the news, keeping up to date with it. For this in particular, like you just said, in Arkansas, it's one that we for sure need to look out for. Would I necessarily say that it is right up top like what it would be for like Texas, New Mexico, and some of those other border states? They're definitely on the lookout for it a lot harder than what we are here, but there's still a potential for it. It's like you said, it's on the move, and it's continuing to move north, so a lot of things happening with it. Some of the things to look for in that one, if you have evidence of fly strike. So we're looking for a fly that's going to be around the size of a common house fly. It'll have kind of that metallic blue body with it, and then those orange eyes, but the biggest difference between it and some of those other flies will be those 3 dark stripes going down its back. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a little difficult whenever it comes to actually catching a fly or even being able to kill those dang things. So some of the other things that we look for that, if they've got a lot of flies around it, you'll see a presence of maggots that'll be in that tissue. And they're pretty unique in that they've got those little barbs right at the end of their mouth, so then they'll literally screw down into that wound and cause a ton more damage. So with that, if you see some of those larvae that's in that wound, get in touch with a vet and have them come out. Some of the other things that we'll look for, if we see some kind of head shaking kind of a behavior whenever it comes to that wound, if we see a lot of, really infection kind of nastiness that's going on with that, I'm making sure to get in touch with the vet for that. They're going to be, again, sound like a broken record, but they're going to be the biggest points of contact for being able to get that figured out if it is a New World screwworm problem.
Yeah. So what biosecurity measures can prevent the spread or introduction of the New World screwworm?
Oh, so many things. and it's some of those that, we think about them in some ways. It's sometimes at the back of our mind too. The thing about this fly is that it affects so many other species. It's not just cattle, even though we have a big love for them, and it's exactly what we're talking about now. We've seen a lot of it in dogs, we've seen it on humans, we've seen it in cats, so many other livestock animal species as well. So paying attention to those animals is going to be the biggest thing that we need to look out for. If they have some kind of a wound, it doesn't matter if it's a big open wound, if they just cut themselves on barbed wire or they just slash their leg a bit, those screwworm flies will start laying those fly larvae around the eyes, around their rear end, anywhere that it's like an open orifice. It doesn't have to be a wound. So kind of paying attention to some of those external spots on those animals is going to be really, really key in making sure that we're being the most vigilant that we possibly can.
So are there any tools or programs available to help producers monitor or report potential cases, whether that be tick, screwworm, anything?
Yeah. I'm telling you, I sound just like a broken record whenever it comes to this. We love it. The veterinarian, your local vet, is going to be your biggest point of contact whenever it comes to any type of animal disease, regardless of if it's one that I talked about here, if it's the Asian longhorn tick, or even if it's screwworm or something else that those cattle can come into contact with. They will be your biggest resource whenever it comes to those. In terms of monitoring, USDA APHIS has a great website that I typically end up pulling whenever I'm going to give a talk. They've got a map that shows the most up-to-date screwworm map that is that's out there. So really showing you those dots about where it is in Mexico, if we've seen that move continuing to go up from that southernmost part. Some of those other countries that it's been affecting so far, we'll be able to see those changes in it. The last time that was updated was, I believe, right here at the end of April. So very glad to see that up. It has a ton of resources on there as well. Getting in touch with the vet, getting in touch with your state veterinarian's office for what you need to do. It's even got some information on there about that coalition, the coalition between the United States and the Panamanian government, working to try to get that border reestablished to continue to moving that down. I believe that's called COPEG. Don't remember exactly what all that stands for, but right. COPEG is going to be that website for that, and it also has those updated numbers, as well as on that too the number of screwworm flies, that sterile screwworm technique that they're utilizing. It's also got how many of those screwworm flies have been produced, how many have been released. It has a lot of information on there as well. A ton of different resources for folks to use.
So, kind of wrapping up here, what's one piece of advice you wish every livestock producer would take to heart going into this summer?
Oh,
lots.
So many things. I think the biggest piece of advice that I could think of for folks that are moving into this summer, and I've said it before, and it's one thing that I think our producers can be really proud of themselves for, but I also know that life happens, and sometimes, we all miss something. Just paying attention to your cattle, right? That is going to be your biggest key for being able to catch something early, or for being able to catch something before the worst can happen. The worst thing that we want to see now is someone end up losing a cow, and that is such a huge knock on that producer if they end up losing something, especially with that market as it is right now. So paying attention to your herd, seeing and being able to figure out what those differences are, making sure that you've got the proper nutrition and that proper water source that's out there for them, those shade structures that's out there. Paying attention to what it is that your cattle are needing and see what they're trying to tell you. They can't talk to us.
Right.
But you can see some of those little things that they may be trying to tell you on that end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so how can people get in touch with you, or if they have any questions, or and you said you're going to county meetings all the time, so.
Yeah. With my job, I get to do a lot of traveling, and I absolutely love that because I get to meet all sorts of producers, and I get to talk with them, and it just really brightens my day. So I'm located here in the Little Rock Extension office. If you hop onto the website, you can search, find my contact information there. My email is there, as well as the phone number. But the biggest thing that we tell folks, if you've got a question about something, or if you want for us to come out and make a farm visit because you've got something going on and you just need that extra help, get in touch with that county agent. If they don't know something, they have plenty of folks down here in the office that can definitely help them out. But they are such a huge wealth of knowledge, and very fortunate to those guys because they answer so many questions before it ends up getting to me, and they ask a ton of the right questions before they have to get in contact with me. So I love those guys. They are absolutely incredible at their job. Getting in touch with the county extension agent. If you don't know who your extension agent is, hopping on the extension website, being able to find that, as well as our contact information is on there as well.
Yeah, and that website is uada.edu, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you want to add, or? points you want to hit home?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to be doing that we ended up starting back in March, it's a series that we're working with Arvest on. It's the Beyond the Fence Lunch and Learn series. So we're really excited to have gotten that up and going. We had a really successful event back in March. We hosted that first one in Batesville. We had Dr. Mitchell come out and give a great economics talk, so we're very thankful for him being out. We had right around 40 folks that was in attendance, and then right around that same much that was back online. So it was wonderful. Our second event is going to be happening on May 22nd. So something happening in a couple of weeks. You'll get to hear from me again, as well as Lauren Teague. So he is one of our livestock inspectors with the Department of Ag. Very great resource for those folks that are over there. I'm very fortunate to be able to get to speak with him about some different technologies that our producers can utilize. We'll be going over the beautiful electronic ID tag that I know that there have been a lot of different questions on. We will be talking about that one, as well as some of those different technologies that our producers can utilize on farm, and talk about how they can benefit their herd, or some of those options that's there for them. So that will be May 22nd. We'll get started with a lunch at 11:30, and then 12 will be when we start that presentation. There is both an in-person and online option. So our location will be in Little Rock. So if you can't end up making it down to Little Rock, it is completely fine. You just scan that QR code that's on the flyer, and you will be able to sign up for that Zoom link to end up getting that for that day. So we'll have that lunch provided. So very big positive that's associated with that one, but also getting that presentation and information out there.
Yeah.
Out there is going to be great.
Yeah. And I'll link that at the bottom of this podcast, so y'all can go ahead and click on that.
Yeah.
So yeah. Is there anything else?
I don't think so. I really appreciate y'all having me out here to talk all of this. There's been so much that's been happening in the cattle industry, and a lot of different things on the disease side, but in general, it's been great. It's been a great year starting out for us. So really excited to see what the rest of this year ends up holding for us, staying strong and moving forward with what we can, and seeing what happens over the next few years. So really excited.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, well, thank y'all for listening this week. As always, like our podcast or subscribe to it on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, everywhere. And also on our e-newsletter, and we'll have that linked there as well if y'all are interested. So, yeah, thank y'all for listening. Thank you, Dr. Kirsten, for being here. But we'll see y'all next week. This is the Arkansas Cattle Business Podcast, your trusted source for all things cattle in the natural state.